Hi, everyone. Welcome to Eternal Iran, an emergency space, Iran emergency space. So Eternal Iran, and I'll say this at the beginning, was set up well before any of this. I'm not someone who's ever opportunistic with these kind of things. It has to come from your soul and heart, really, not because, oh, look, it's happening, let's jump on the bandwagon. But the whole purpose of the channel was to highlight the great and the good of Iran and Iranians. It was on the back of successful Iranians. Now I'm holding a lot of spaces when it comes to Iran situation rooms, Iran emergency spaces. And I've been told repeatedly, we need you on YouTube, Johnny. We need you on different type of platforms because you need to be omnipresent on multiple platforms because you can't rely on any of them. Unfortunately, that's the reality. I wish I could, but you just never know with any platform. So you need to have multiple presence on multiple platforms in flying the flag. All ears and eyes in Iran. So a lot has been going on, as it always feels like it is with Iran. And we've had a build-up to these ceasefire talks in Islamabad. Where they're going to go, where they're not going to go. Pakistan, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, facilitating these ceasefire talks with the US. And some said, even on Friday night, are they going to come? Are they not? They were saying, we're not going to come. It needs to have a ceasefire with Lebanon. It needs to be regional. They sell these preconditions. You need to agree this. You need to agree that. You had Ghalibaf who's been tweeting away. It's amazing how they can tweet away, right? It's amazing how they can use their white SIM card and have their social media accounts, but yet Iranians inside Iran can't even have any internet. This digital blackout has been a record where Iranians are literally in the dark. They've been locked out and blacked out from the World Wide Web, which we all rely on. It's become a human basic right, is the internet. But yet they can. Like Abbas once said, the foreign secretary of the Islamic Republic, I speak for the whole country of Iran. No, you speak for the whole country of the Islamic Republic. So they were going to come. Were they not going to come? They had these preconditions that Israel had to do this, Israel had to do that, that there was violations, that they hadn't turned up on Friday to Islamabad, but I always thought they would. You check the previous live. I always thought they would turn up. And then they came out to Islamabad where they were kind of coordinated in terms of what they were wearing. They were all wearing this kind of jacket and felt very pleased with themselves. You had Ghalibaf, who was leading the delegation, the parliamentary speaker, the former mayor of Tehran, and a Islamic Republic hardcore individual. People describe him as a pragmatist or somehow a moderate. There's no moderates. There are those who might see things in a different way that may be less radical, but they're all part of the same regime. And the same part of the regime is the regime, right? These are sometimes Western commentators where they describe Laranjani, for example, as a somehow pragmatic kind of guy and a moderate of some description. And he was the one who was the mastermind behind the January 8th and 9th massacre, according to reports. This is where they get it so wrong, time and time again. So you have Ghalibaf leading this delegation, which the US had earmarked as a potential man that they could maybe do business with in some form or fashion. And I think there was a viewpoint within that administration that somehow they'll find the Delcy Rodriguez, that they'll somehow find a Venezuela type within the regime. And I think they've been trying out things time and time again with once certain leaders were assassinated or eliminated, then to the next one, then to the next one. And I think they thought that this one would be their man. Let me just check this out. Okay. They don't seem to realize that this regime has three pillars: death to America, death to Israel, the hijab. Take that away, there is no Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic has to be in a constant state of chaos, and mayhem has to have that revolutionary failed state type behavior, because that's what it's been in, a constant revolutionary state. So anyway, they came with Abbas, the foreign secretary, and I think his deputy, etc. And over the course of the last 24 hours, we've seen 21 hours of negotiations, apparently. 21 hours of negotiations. And people are thinking, well, it's taking a long time. Is that actually going to end up in a deal? Because the longer it takes, normally these things somehow lead to a breakthrough. And Iranians were on tenterhooks, and people in the region on tenterhooks. What's going to happen? So it looked likely around about 12 at night UK time, or 1 in the morning, something like that, that they couldn't bridge the gap, that the negotiations had concluded in Islamabad and that no deal had been reached. But people were awaiting the press conference of JD Vance. And a lot of Iranians have been nervous with JD Vance because they see him as someone through the Tucker Carlson crew. They see him as someone who is an isolationist. There's been reports that JD Vance has been anti this whole thing, would like to do more of a deal. And the regime also thought that he was a Tucker type person because they didn't want Witkoff or Kushner. They felt betrayed by Witkoff and Kushner. They felt they could manipulate JD Vance. So they were hopeful from their side that they would be able to somehow, because they're highly manipulative, the Islamic Republic, would get their way, would somehow be able to get their way when it comes to JD Vance. They had identified that he's the weakest link in the Trump administration. They don't want Rubio. Rubio, Iranians love, a lot of the region loves, in terms of being able to get it, understands what the regime's about and what to do and what not to do. So anyway, they got their man. He was leading negotiations with Kushner and Witkoff. So everybody was waiting for the press conference. What would JD Vance say? What would JD Vance say? And he basically came out and it was him and also Witkoff and co. In terms of you see JD Vance, you see also. I'm going to try to share a screen if I can, so we can look at. Bear with me. Let's look at what he exactly said, so you can see it here. Hold on now. Let's see. JD Vance. Okay. Okay, let's get this guy. Right, can you hear that? Can you hear that or not? Hold on. Well, you can't because I'm playing it and I haven't shared the screen. Hold on. Okay. Can you hear that, everyone? Can you hear that in the back? No. All right.
Made very clear what our red lines
Can you hear it now?
What things we're willing to accommodate them on and what things we're...
Let's play this
again. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement. And I think that's
Can you
bad
hear it
news
now,
for Iran,
or
much more than
it's
it's bad
still-
news for the United States of America.
You're not
So
able to hear it.
we go back to the United States having not come to an
I can hear
agreement.
it. Okay.
We've made
I'll
very
shut up.
clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could. And they have chosen not to accept our terms.
در مورد یک سری از موضوعات ما به تفاهم‌هایی رسیدیم واقعیت. اما در مورد دو سه موضوع مهم خب دیدگاه‌ها فاصله داشت و نهایتاً منجر به توافق نشد این گفتگوها.
We hope that the two sides continue with the positive spirit to achieve durable peace and prosperity for the entire region and beyond. It is imperative that the parties continue to uphold their commitment to ceasefire. Pakistan has been and will continue to play its role to facilitate engagement and dialogue between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States of America in the days to come.
Okay. So he basically said they've been negotiating for 21 hours, and it's kind of weird when I do that YouTube and add it, because I can't hear it. As long as you can, that's what matters. I can see it, but I can't hear it. So he said that they've been negotiating for 21 hours and that they had to reach an impasse. The Islamic Republic said they had 4 red lines, apparently. That was control of the Strait of Hormuz, unfreezing of the sanctions and assets, also war reparations, and I think there was something else. I think it might be on the nuclear lines. So JD Vance basically said they had sent overtures, they had tried to make a deal, they had been as flexible as they could. They gave them the final offer to do this in terms of the final terms, but they couldn't get over the line. They basically refused the terms offered. And then Zarif the liar, the previous foreign minister of the Islamic Republic, tweeting away, beavering away. So he basically said, oh, that's why it failed, the negotiations, because you said our terms and we don't respond well to that. You have to treat us with respect. Respect is earned. It's earned. It's not given. It's earned. When you hold the world to hostage in terms of economic terrorism in the Strait of Hormuz, and then they have the audacity to come out with these lines, like kind of, we want this and we demand that, and if you don't do this and if you don't do that, who's the superpower here? Who's the superpower? Last time I checked, it was the United States of America. That's the last time I checked. Who's the superpower? Because with this regime, you give an inch, they will take a mile. When they smell weakness, they prey on it. Always have done. Always have done. It will never, ever change, right? When they smell it, they seize it and they add to it and they add to it and they think, yeah, yeah. Because some of the regime truly believe they're winning. And their ace in the pack is the Strait of Hormuz. That they know this is hurting. And they believe it's causing a division amongst the Europeans and the US, because the Europeans haven't allowed their airspace. Countries like Spain, Austria, even Switzerland. Switzerland's normally neutral with these things. I think they were even neutral in World War II. That's Switzerland, beautiful country and all that. France, France being France, great country, terrible government in terms of Macron the joke, doing deals and all of that kind of stuff. And the UK letting the US down for one of the very few times actually in history, not wanting to get involved. This is where they get it all wrong, right? If you stood all together on this and actually said, no, as a world, as a collective, we're not having it, it would be game over. But instead, people are playing politics, looking at their political demographics, in the United Kingdom, looking at, there are cities where there are certain persuasions that carry weight, and politics do play, and the Labour Party does pander to the left, and the left has an unfortunate fetish for radical Islamists, unfortunately, the black and red. And so therefore, that is the issue. That is the issue. So they come out punchy with these things, dictating, saying who's coming in and who's not, and they've laid down all these mines apparently in the Strait of Hormuz. And is it affecting everybody? Because in the West, you know, we live in a global world, and 20% of the world's fertilizer comes from the Strait of Hormuz. You know, energy prices, gas, oil, all of that is coming from this little strip. And they are weaponizing it to the nth degree because that is their card. So I'm going to read some of the comments on YouTube. So we're on YouTube, folks. If you're listening on X, we've got about 287 people right now listening to this. So we're both live on X Spaces on YouTube as well. So live on both platforms. Got to be omnipresent. So I'm just looking at, someone says here, key question, English, Johnny. You only speak one good language, English. Key question. Is the 2-week ceasefire going to hold for second round military preparation plans, or US-Israel will break the fire earlier? That's a really good question. Some have said that this ceasefire has been about a pause to refuel, to replenish defense stocks of the GCC, etc., because they've been hit. You know, Islamic Republic has been hitting all the GCC. It's supposed to be, you know, brothers from another mother, but it hasn't been that way, because with friends like these, who needs enemies, right? So they've been doing it because of deliberate calculus. Okay, cause chaos and mayhem in terms of the GCC, because they control a lot of the energy, Saudi and Qatar, for example, in particular, and therefore you raise prices when it comes to the oil price and traders, etc. And they hope that the price goes to such a level that the pain's too much and they can outlast the US and Israel on this. This is what they're thinking. They can outlast the US and Israel. And therefore, by outlasting and surviving, they then declare victory. They have won. They have defeated the great Satan, as they call it, the US and Israel together. And then they would have a march. There would be all of that, all that, loads of finger, all that kind of coming out, etc. Because often wars are won when you break the will of the other. So some people have said that they're replenishing, restocking the GCC. For instance, in Saudi, they took a hit on one of their pipelines. I think they've repaired it now. So 7 million barrels a day is now being able to flow back. And there's been some reports of troops movement in terms of the 82nd Airborne Division. Has also been said to have come into the region. I'm just reading some headlines here, so bear with me as I update you on the latest. I don't care what Pope Leo says. It's amazing how this Vatican Pope comes out on stuff. Okay, I'm going to read you the full statement. Do tweet out the post if you're on X Spaces. It helps for distribution. It helps me to get people onto the show, the broadcast, and also on YouTube. Tell a friend. They then tell another friend. They then tell another friend. Then they tell another friend. Right. Okay. So this is a statement whilst I'm multitasking. And men can multitask, folks. I know it's been said that men can't multitask. I can. So Trump, he says to Iran, we know he means Islamic Republic, but just bear with me. Iran promised to open the Strait of Hormuz, and they knowingly failed to do so. This caused anxiety, dislocation, and pain to many people and countries throughout the world. They say they put mines in the water, even though all of their navy and most of their mine droppers have been completely blown up. They may have done so, but what ship owner would want to take the chance? Which is true, because this is one of the problems. Insurance, and who controls the insurance market is Lloyd's of London. Lloyd's of London. And this has been the problem. You can't insure the ships, and the ships then carry the oil, then it causes a spike, and then people are paying for it in terms of the gas stations, people are paying for it in terms of the energy bills, and then people are paying for it in the food prices, and then it affects politicians, and then it causes pain, and then it causes pressure points, and then the Islamic Republic are getting the popcorn out. But it says there is a great dishonor and permanent harm to the reputation of Iran and what's left of their leaders. But we are beyond all of that. As they promised, they better begin the process of getting this international, and he does this in capital letters, waterway open and fast. Every law in this book is being violated by them. I have been fully debriefed by Vice President J.D. Vance, Kushner, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff on the meeting that took place in Islamabad, through the kind of very competent leadership of Field Marshal Asim Munir and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif of Pakistan. Not bad for the pronunciation, folks. I should get brownie points here. They are very extraordinary men. I disagree. But anyhow, and continuously thank me for saving 30 to 50 million lives in what would have been a horrendous war with India. I always appreciate hearing that. The amount of humanity spoken of is incomprehensible. The meeting with Iran began early in the morning and lasted throughout the night, close to 20 hours. I could go into great detail and talk about much that has been gotten, but there's only one thing that matters. Iran is unwilling, and he puts this in capitals, to give up its nuclear ambitions. In many ways, the points that were agreed to are better than us continuing our military operations to conclusion, but all of those points don't matter compared to allowing nuclear power to be in the hands of such volatile, difficult, unpredictable people. My three representatives are, as all of this time went by, became not surprisingly very friendly and respectful of Iran's representatives, Ghalibaf, Abbas Araghchi, and Ali Bagheri. But that doesn't matter because they were unyielding as to the single most important issue. And as I've always said right from the beginning and many years ago, Iran, in capitals, will never have a nuclear weapon. Donald Trump. Then he said as well, our Navy will now block any ship trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. And then it goes on. So, okay, what's he saying here? He says here, Trump, additionally, at an appropriate moment, we are fully locked and loaded, and our military will finish up the little that is left of Iran. So someone says here, if President Trump moves forward with a Strait of Hormuz blockade, then the Islamic Republic tankers, including all shadow fleets vessels loading at Kharg Island, may now face US naval interception, seizure, which will inevitably hit the regime's pocket because 90% of all exports come out of that Kharg Island. Some people said that they were going to take on Kharg Island. It's so nice to do a YouTube, by the way, and a live when I'm nice and refreshed at a good time. Because most of the time, you know, you run your life and everything else, and I try to do whatever I can. But it's nice to have this freshness when doing this. So what do we think? Let me check the comments. So, how would you respond without cruelty? What does it mean by that? Hold on. Let me see what some of these people say. Someone says the sanctions were also economic terrorism. How do you figure that out? They have been the head of terrorism since the inception of the Islamic Republic in 1979. Look, I'm going to tell you hard truths. Who created Hezbollah? The Islamic Republic. What is Hezbollah? For some of the lefties, radical lefties and Islamists, they're a resistance. They're part of the resistance. For everybody else, they're a terrorist organization. They founded it. They're also involved in Hamas. They're also involved in Yemen with the Houthis. We've seen what's happened in Iraq. We've seen what's gone on with Syria before. You know, Lebanon was once upon a time the Switzerland of the Middle East. So people don't just put economic sanctions and wake up one day and say, you know, I'm going to put economic sanctions on you. Yes, people weaponize stuff. Nobody's a saint, right? At all. And everything in life is power. Comes down to control and power and money. But they have caused nothing but mayhem and chaos. And as the Shah said, the gates of hell would open after he had gone. And that's exactly what's happened. Prior to this, we didn't have any of this. Iran was Iran, right? We still had the Palestinian-Israel conflict, but we didn't have what the Islamic Republic has become, and it's become a monster when it involves all kinds of chaos and mayhem and terrorism. So that's the viewpoint of some, but they tend to have that viewpoint. And then when you look at other viewpoints in terms of positions, they tend to be Islamic Republic apologists. They tend to be against Iran being free, and Iranians tend to be against Pahlavi and the Shah, and tend to be always on the opposite side with that viewpoint. It's a viewpoint, but that's my view on that viewpoint. So someone says, how would you respond to a government that kidnaps and tortures you people by sanctions? Again, it's one of those viewpoints, right? They tend to be socialist Marxists. They tend to be those that are apologists for the regime, for the Islamic Republic regime. And some of them live in the West. They have homes in the West. They may have been educated in the West. They party even in the West. They buy properties in the West. They enjoy all the benefits of the West, but they really hate the West. It's all the West's fault, but they live in the West. If you don't like it, why are you living in the West? So someone says collective punishment is cruel and a crime. It's the same individual. Sanctions, and I don't run an echo chamber, so everyone's entitled to their viewpoint. Sanctions have never worked. The sanctions in Iran have proven not to work, crippled the people, strengthened the government. No, you have what's called the Iranian economy, and then you have the Islamic Republic regime economy, right? And it's the same in North Korea, exactly. So what do you expect? People to say, oh, you know, turn the other cheek and say, clap your hand time. Look, they're not Hare Krishna, right? They're not Hare Krishna type. Let's call a spade a spade. It's not a fluffy kind of, oh, you're so fluffy. So someone says here, just listen to this one report from the Islamic Republic. They spent millions to spread Islam in Japan after years, but they managed to convert one person. Yeah, I knew that. I knew that. And also feel free to comment on X in terms of the chat, because I can see your comments come up. And also message me if you want to come on to the show as well. I also recall that Trump yesterday warned China Okay. I don't know what happened there. I lost connection. Thank you for reposting the stream, by the way. So he warned China that if they were to provide weapons to the Islamic Republic, because there was reports of anti-ship weapons coming in to the Islamic Republic, that they would face grave consequences. So someone said, check out. Someone says here, oil-linked futures surged to $127 per barrel following Trump's statement. This is the problem, folks. This is the problem, and they know it. Trump has also said we will not buckle under economic extortion from the regime, because they're fully well versed with this. I think with the Ukraine crisis, the oil price may have gone to 150 Brent crude, and people talk about 115. So the problem is, this no man's land is dangerous, right? You can't carry this on because it will benefit the regime. The regime will ultimately benefit from this, and they know it. So something fundamental has to change in terms of the equation. And that equation is the Strait of Hormuz. There has to be a risk calculation. The risk versus reward calculation. And a lot have had a fear of risk, in terms of losing, having fatalities of losing ships or fatalities or whatever it might be, which is natural and normal. But this can't carry on, because this economic extortion is going to only aid the Islamic Republic, and they will feel they'll get better terms because the world will buckle because of risks of recession. So Trump needs to do something, because it doesn't look like the Europeans will. It doesn't look like NATO will. They're just watching by. I mean, Starmer did go to the GCC, but only after the ceasefire. He then talks about words like de-escalation and all that kind of stuff, but doesn't actually do anything. People are saying here, Trump just completely ruined the oil markets again. Wait till oil markets open tonight. A complete blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, including Chinese and Iranian ships, is disastrous. And I will not be surprised if the Houthis in Iran decide to close the Bab al-Mandab Strait in retaliation for this. That's the Red Sea, right? That's the Red Sea where some of the oil has been redirected away from the Strait of Hormuz. So someone says here, back to calling Mohammed Bagher Ghalibaf, let's say, Mohammed Bagher Ghalibaf, a moderate, is absurd. 99 crackdown, students were thrown from rooftops on video. That's a mafia-style brutality, not governance. It's true. So he has announced this naval blockade of Iran, by the way. It looks. No ships go in or out. People are saying this will have massive consequences for the regime's economy. This is what happens when you waste JD's Vance time for 21 hours. Game on. But then that affects the world, folks, as well. People's mortgages, people's lives, businesses. I know people say, look, it's a war, there's a bigger things in the end of the day. But the reality as well, you've got to factor that in, because people do affect massively politicians. What else could he do? Just thinking out loud, brainstorming with you guys. What else could he do? So if he says this and the future markets of the oil and gas is going to go up and up and up, which would then cause massive pressure and problems, which would then feed pressure points back on the US, etc. Although the US doesn't get any of their oil from the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, they're pumping out more oil than ever before. The UK doesn't get any of the oil from the Strait of Hormuz. They get it from the North Sea and some other players. But jet fuel, they do. But it's a global market, isn't it? Oil prices are dictated globally. So someone says here, they say Trump is using this time to clean the mines of the Strait of Hormuz. Interesting. Didn't the Islamic Republic do a map of where they had put the mines? Am I going mad? Didn't I see like a tweet of some description of a map of where they had dropped the mines in the Strait of Hormuz? So I'm going to show you what Sky News, Ayatollah Sky News have been saying, because they have the Islamic Republic winning, and the US losing on this. Yeah, they do. So does Ayatollah BBC. So I'm going to play you the clip. So Sky News is covering this now. Sky News is covering this announcement. US Navy will blockade Strait of Hormuz. The US Navy will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. I've instructed our Navy to seek and interdict every vessel in international waters that has paid a toll to Iran. That's in reference to Europeans, right? The French have been doing that, allegedly. So are some others. The US, I think in Spanish, with the Marxist prime minister that they've got. Again, Spain, beautiful country, great country. Horrible leader, Sanchez. The US will begin destroying the mines Iran has laid in the Strait. So they haven't been destroyed, he added. He continued, any Iranian who fires at us or at peaceful vessels will be blown to hell. Trump warned we are fully locked and loaded, and added the US military will finish up the little that is left of Iran. Interesting. I'm going to play this clip of this guy. Hold on a second. Let me add screen. Is it this one? Have I got that right? Oh, hold on. Right, can you hear? No, that's Al Jazeera. I don't want Al Jazeera. No, hold on. I played that one before. Let me find it. Right. Can you hear that? Can you hear that, everyone? Can you hear that? Put a comment in the chat. No, you can't hear it. Okay. Why can't you hear it? You should be able to hear it.
Yesterday.
Can you hear it now? Hold on. Let me play
We're
again.
joined now by military analyst Sean.
Can you hear it now?
To delve in. From a military perspective now, we know the ceasefire will last for 2 weeks. From your perspective,
Yes,
though,
no?
where are we at? What's your sense of what we're seeing?
Yeah, Leah, I sort of shared Dom's view that there was a sense of optimism, wasn't there, around the ceasefire? It was genuinely a sense that America needed an off-ramp at the moment, that Iran saw no benefit in the war continuing. But with the talks ending after less than 24 hours, clearly that there is a sense of deflation here. I think it's particularly the Strait of Hormuz is already, they're still in control of the Iranians. I think what's interesting that 3 supertankers did pass through yesterday laden with oil, and 2 US warships went in there ostensibly to look at mine clearing, but were immediately threatened by the Iranians. The nuclear weapons, I think, is the key one, because Donald Trump said that it was 99% of the conversation was about nuclear weapons. And we'll get a bit more onto that maybe later. But I think with what's I think really interesting is the Iranians claimed that at these negotiations, America tried to secure terms that they weren't able to achieve through military action. I thought that was really interesting. That showed a sort of sense of defiance almost. But it is worth remembering the ceasefire was originally agreed for 2 weeks. If you like the market trader analogy, which was used before, you go back and forth a few times. So are we ready for round 2? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, really interesting, isn't it? So let's talk about the options then, particularly for the US and Iran. Where do you think they stand on both sides? Both have so much to lose.
They do, but I think, again, very much as Dom said, I think the risk is here that President Trump might be tempted to go back to more military action again, return to the war. He came out in Truth Social and talked about a blockade. Now, it sounds good, but I think all the viewers will understand that the Strait of Hormuz is currently closed, and blockading it closes it. So I'm not entirely sure how that's going to help. Convoy escorts have been used. All of that would take a long time. And frankly, the war would drag out, something President Trump doesn't want to happen. Before the war, he talked about bombing Iran to a stone age. He could go after Karg Island again. Remember that, the outlet where the oil is. And he's already bombed the northern half, which is where the military facilities were. Could he take that? Could he bomb the energy infrastructure and follow through with his threats before? Grave risk of escalation. But if you look at the Iranian side, they've also, they've simply want to maintain control of the Straits of Hormuz. They've withstood the bows, slings, and arrows of the biggest superpower in the world, and they're still left standing, and they still control the Strait of Hormuz. So they know that the US needs an off-ramp, and there's nothing they have to worry about from the US. They will know they can retaliate. If America strikes their own infrastructure, they'll attack the Middle East. That makes a bad situation even worse. They've got ballistic missiles, they've got cruise missiles, they've got drones, still plenty of them. And the worrying thing we heard overnight was that China has now, they've got an oil for arms deal with Iran. They've been apparently providing air defense capabilities to Iran. Why is that? Given that Iran probably has no answer to American air power. But remember what happened when they shot down one of the F-15s and the race to get a prisoner of war. If they're bolstering their air defense capability, that's going to threaten the American air power. That's going to raise the prospects of more prisoners of war potentially. And that would have profound implications for the future of the conflict. Meanwhile, the only other person obviously is Prime Minister Netanyahu. It's pretty clear, although he's been forced to negotiate with the Lebanese authorities. The reality is the war is unfinished there. He needs to solve, he wants to solve the Hezbollah situation. The challenge is that will take time, and that's time that President Trump doesn't have.
Okay, sure.
Okay. So that was that guy. What do we think of what he had to say? I mean, I'm not a big fan of this guy. He's kind of this aristocratic type military figure that they rock out on Sky News. Some of his views are quite out of touch, I would say. So someone says here, Iran is already in the Stone Age, thanks to Islam. Yes and no. Yes and no. Not in terms of, Iranians are very capable people. And the country did incredible things under the Shah, etc., which this regime has benefited from. But in terms of this regime taking back Iran, 1400 years, yeah. And in danger of putting Iran into the Stone Age now, moving forwards, if something doesn't happen. But what's your thoughts on that before I play another clip? They get all these analysts. They tend to be kind of left. They tend to have agendas. They tend to belong to kind of institutions and think tanks. I'm educated from Oxford, therefore I'm an expert. It's one of the greatest universities in the world. But I think people are tired of experts at times as well, so-called experts. Now, in the age of AI, the real expertise is collating information, critically analyzing it, putting it together, and then having your own viewpoint. Before, we used to rely on people to be the oracle because they used to monopolize knowledge for themselves, etc. And we're beholden to legacy media, TV. We didn't have social media. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have AI. We didn't have any of these things. So they could really drive the narrative. But it's amazing how exposed legacy media has been, especially on this. So I'm going to play you another clip. And if I can get this, this will show you the kind of narratives that are playing out. Right, hold on. Getting better at doing this, you know. It's like anything in life. Practice, practice, practice. Okay, hold on. I'll play this clip. Because I'm half British, half Iranian. That's why.
In the region, we're joined now by
Can you hear this,
Yasmin Mabou,
folks?
who's a researcher at University Oxford's Middle East Centre. Great to have you with us, Yasmin. Shall we start with the ceasefire? This was 21 hours of talks. And just to start off with the significance of high-level talks face-to-face since, well, the 70s.
This was unusual. And as you can expect, it hasn't, not everyone in Iran is supportive of this. But the situation necessitated it, and we did have an unprecedented situation, yes.
What do you make of Iranian state TV reporting that potentially that the US just pushed too far?
I think even before going to these talks, both the Iranian side and the US side were quite far from each other when it came to the issue of nuclear enrichment. The text of the ceasefire reads differently, as far as I can tell, in Persian and English. So it was inevitable that the US will raise the issue of nuclear enrichment. I don't think the question was, are you going to develop a nuclear weapon? Iran's official position, at least on paper, is they will not. However, the enrichment was presented. What we have to think of is, irrespective of my analysis or anyone else's analysis, Iran is under the impression that it hasn't lost this war. Some people say it has won. Internally, propaganda says that. That's not quite true. Infrastructure is destroyed, universities are destroyed, and so on. However, it would have been very difficult for the Iranian side to accept an end to enrichment after 40 days survival, which was a position before the US attack. So in some ways, you can understand this. On the other hand, the United States can't appear to be accepting a position that Iran
I don't really have a good feeling for
before this war, because that would be admitting to, at least if not a defeat, a stalemate in this war.
Yeah, and it's really quite interesting now, isn't it, the position of Iran, because effectively they're in control of the Strait of Hormuz, and perhaps that's where they see their leverage.
Exactly. Some people are saying, why would Iran need a nuclear weapon now that they have managed to capitalize on the strategic position of the Strait of Hormuz? However, I'm sure neither the United States nor other countries will accept Iran's current position on the Strait of Hormuz. There has to be negotiations, there has to be a deal. Trump is talking of Iran and US jointly controlling the strait. My understanding is that the US negotiating team had proposed new items regarding the Strait of Hormuz that the Iranians couldn't negotiate. As the foreign minister said, the first meeting is a difficult one, we couldn't decide. My guess is they would have had problems selling any new proposals if they accepted it and went back to Iran and various factions said we hadn't agreed on that.
Where do you see this going next? And in particular, how do you view the ceasefire?
We are in a dangerous situation because obviously the talks have failed. There's about 12 days left of this ceasefire. My guess is neither side has an appetite for relaunching the war. Iran has suffered considerably from this war. The United States doesn't want at this stage to start military action. However, if in the next few days a new initiative, new talks are not planned, we are back in square one. And of course, the whole issue of Israel attacking Lebanon remains on the agenda. So Iran might use that excuse as breach of ceasefire. The US might use Iran's relative control, not complete control of the Strait of Hormuz as breach of ceasefire. Very dangerous times.
What have you made of the element of Israel's bombardment of Lebanon and whether Lebanon is indeed included in any kind of ceasefire deal?
Iran claims the ceasefire deal did include that. Israel said they were not party to this. I haven't read exactly what the US is saying on this. It is a very sad situation because the Lebanese people are suffering this as a result, as a consequence of the war between US and Iran. In many ways, they weren't directly involved in this, except Hezbollah attacked, but they weren't party to the US-Iran war. The question remains, will the Europeans put enough pressure on Israel to stop the bombing or at least go into serious negotiations?
Okay. Marvin.
Johnny.
Hi. I've got Marvin on stage, folks. So I was just playing that clip. I played a few clips now on some of the analysis coming out of Sky News and other networks along with what's happening. So speaking in the show, there was a relay of the last 24 hours with Vance doing the negotiations for 20 hours with the regime. Some people thought the longer it went on, they were going to make a deal. Then transpired that the deal wasn't going to happen. Then he did his press conference saying they were too far apart and they had basically turned down their terms. And then Trump wakes up this morning saying naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz starting now. Anyone comes in or goes out, they'll be blown apart, especially anyone who's taken any of the tolls. What's your thoughts on where we're at? Because the futures now is climbing again, the oil prices, and we know their play, right? The economics pulling that tug in terms of their ace in their pack.
Well, first of all, I want to know if my audio, I'm in a very loud
I
place.
can't hear you.
Okay. It's because you can't hear me at all?
I can hear you, but it's very low.
Yeah.
So just for people to know Marvin's background, he's ex-military, was involved in the invasion of Iraq. He knows his onions when it comes to these kind of things. So yeah, just trying to see if he can get good audio. He's in a busy area at the moment, so I think as soon as he does, he'll be able to get back to me. So I'm going to read some of the chat here. Has there been some sort of shipments from China to Iran in the last few days? This has been news or rumors of large transport planes landing in Iran from China. I've heard those rumors too. And I think Trump heard those rumors because he warned if they did, there'd be big consequences. Someone says here, Islamists were threatening the life of Pezeshkian, which is the president of the Islamic Republic, because he wasn't involved, was he? At all in the talks. He was just tweeting. The Islamists were threatening the life of Pezeshkian for even talking about negotiation only a few days before ceasefire. And then someone says Trump's version of IMEC is being realized. To all of those Americans first, or really America last, this is the biggest pivot towards China. There doesn't exist a more brilliant move to cut off China than the moves on Venezuela, Iran, Cuba, chess pieces ever. Can you still post, by the way, folks, on Twitter? Well, if you can't, you won't be able to answer that. I don't know if you can, because you just don't know with this tech. It's all I'm still learning as we go along. But it's all over the news, this blockade, and the oil markets are going to be opening tonight in Asia.
Oh, how about now? How's that?
Yeah, that's better, I think.
I don't know how long my signal is going to last. I'm in the middle of a very big blue water body of water, so I'm on a ship right now. So I'm not going to say anything more.
Right.
Yeah. So let's see how long this will last. But I wanted to get on because I had a chance to check in this morning and listen to some of the talks, and I was very I don't know if the word unimpressed was, but my read on JD Vance's walking away from, the negotiations for how many hours was it? And well, what I mean by walking away was just the ending of the conversation. We're back at square one. We are literally back at square one. And to me, what I see is this window of the Iranian people rising up and what they need to do and to take advantage. This window, as you know, Johnny, isn't going to last. The situation is not going to get, there's never going to be a perfect formula for the Iranian people to rise up, nor is there going to be a third country that's going to come in and relieve them, of the government, because that would just literally require a full-on invasion of Iran, which it's not in the playbook. It's not on the cards. But what is in the cards is right now there is there are multiple vectors of conflict, multiple, to include the tactical, but also to include the information space, to include cyber, to include the domestic issues, right? Domestically, the removal of the internet, the destruction of a variety of buildings and chaos in that sense. So what Iran projects in the media is, as you know, is very curated and very limited in scope. So I don't know where the Iranian people, or the resistance, we'll call it for the lack of a better word, where do they stand and what do they hope to achieve? That's the part that I think is a little bit strange. I don't think that Trump can withstand any other options. So waiting another week or two for him to take an action is a waste of time. So this idea of the blockade to me is new news. Maybe you could fill me in a little bit on that. But that's kind of where I stand right now.
Yeah. So he basically said, I'm going to read it out again. Okay, so Trump now says this. This is the latest. NATO and UK now want to help with the Strait of Hormuz, Trump says. NATO wants to help with the Strait of Hormuz, Donald Trump has said. Speaking to Fox News, the US president said peace talks with Iran were very friendly towards the end. We're going to be blockading the Strait of Hormuz. It takes a little while, he said, adding that it won't take long to clean out the strait. He claimed numerous countries are going to be helping us with the strait, adding that the UK and other nations were sending minesweepers. Trump said his social media post, in which he threatened prior on Tuesday night that a whole civilization will die tonight unless Iran agreed the deal to end the war and reopen the Strait of Hormuz, brought the Iranian negotiations to the table. He said the Iranians had not left the bargaining table, adding, "I predict they may come back and give us everything we want." So his whole thing is that they're going to blockade the Strait of Hormuz, not allow any of the ships to go in or out, cripple the Islamic Republic economy, which is heavily reliant on the oil trade. You've got Kharg Island, where 90% of those oil exports go out of. And thereby, if you cripple their economy, then you cripple their ability to pay for their suppressive forces, etc., and all of that goes with it. The regime says, no, we still have control of the Strait of Hormuz. So this development with NATO and UK, which have been reluctant up until this point, NATO says we're a defensive organization. Article 5 is defensive, it's not offensive. We're not involved in this. The Europeans are saying this is not our war. We weren't involved, so we're not involved. But now he's claiming they will help. Where is the? What's your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, at least he's recognizing the center of gravity. The center of gravity in this entire war right now, at a tactical level, is the Horn of Hormuz. That's it. That's where all of this is really leading to. You know, has the administration destroyed missile launchers, IRGC bases, some oil and power systems, not necessarily power plants, but yes. But right now, the tension lies in the Horn, and here's the key thing. He does not have the ability to win in the Hormuz today tactically. So whether it's a time for buying time to build up both on a weapons and a personnel standpoint, are they going? I think I said this before. Are they going to invade Iran? Not at all. That's off the table. That was probably never on the table. But the weapon that Iran has used is the Horn. And so what does that include as a defensive mechanism? NATO knows, and so does England, that defensively, the world is losing, right, when it comes to this new economical power impact with the Horn and energy, the destruction of energy, basically. So you look at countries like the Philippines and India and Pakistan, who have been suffering tremendously from the lack of oil. That is a destructive mechanism. It might not be tactical, it might not be kinetic, but it is destructive. And that's where I think if he can leverage that, there can be a lot of advantage. But it's never going to bring, Johnny, you know this, it's never going to bring Iran to their knees. They're never going to agree to the three major points, right? No nuclear technology, no nuclear weapons, no ballistic missiles. And then there's a third point, which I can't remember right now. It was no nuclear, no ballistic. And do you remember
proxies.
The third point?
The proxies. Keep
I don't think it was. I don't think it was even. I don't think it was proxies. I think it was higher than that.
The enrichment.
Right. No nuclear anything. No enrichment anything. No nuclear anything.
And the Strait of Hormuz. They can't control.
Oh, in the Strait. In the Strait. Yeah. Right. That's right. That's right. They're never going to. Iran isn't going to say, okay, yes, we agree. They're not going to say that. And so the only option that Trump has, specifically now, because they have stated that those are the three main points. They're not going to. The U.S. isn't going to renege on that and say, okay, well, that's fine. We'll let you control the Hormuz. Never going to say that. They're never going to say no nuclear. Okay, go ahead. You can have some nuclear. They're never going to say that, right? Because the entire administration has been based upon no nuclear. And ballistic missile? I don't know.
Yeah. So his tweet was this, Marvin, actually. He says, so there you have it. The meeting went well. Most points were agreed to, but the only point that really mattered, nuclear, was not effective immediately. The United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. At some point, we will reach an all being allowed to go in, all being allowed to go out bases, but Iran has not allowed that to happen by merely saying there may be a mine out there somewhere that nobody knows about but them. This is world extortion, and leaders of countries, especially the United States of America, will never be extorted. I have also instructed our Navy to seek and interdict every vessel in international waters that has paid a toll to Iran. No one who pays an illegal toll will have safe passage on the high seas. We will also begin destroying the mines the Iranians laid in the straits. Any Iranian who fires at us or at peaceful vessels will be blown to hell. Iran knows better than anyone how to end this situation, which has already devastated their country. Their navy is gone, their air force is gone, their anti-aircraft and radars are useless. Khomeini and most of their leaders, supposed to say Khamenei, people Khomeini, and most of their leaders are dead, all because of their nuclear ambition. The blockade will begin shortly. Other countries will be involved with this blockade. Iran will not be allowed to profit off this illegal act of extortion. They want money, and more importantly, they want nuclear. Additionally, and at appropriate moment, we are fully locked and loaded, and our military will finish up the little that is left of Iran.
And then, you know what? Good. It was a good chess move. It's a great chess move. You know why? Iran won't be able to resist. They will fire upon. They will. They will not be able to resist the temptation that the blockade is going to allow the Horn to open. I just don't see it, because that is their center of gravity. If Iran can't control the Hormuz, then Iran is dead. Control the Hormuz, which is a passive control, right? Then the only other option they have is to become tactical again. And if they become tactical again, then they just gave Trump the green card to go ahead and continue doing what they need to do.
How the economic turbulence of all this now, you know, so many economies are so precarious, especially after COVID, after Russia, etc., and the cost of living and the rising interest rates and the energy crisis and everything that's happened in the last few years. I suppose from a market perspective, they need certainty, they need clarity. They either need this ended, like an end, which will drop the price, or a conclusive victor, an outcome that will end the price, not a drip drip or no man's land or just this economic kind of terrorism in some respects playing out, where it kind of goes on and like what's happened with Ukraine and Russia. So, I mean, what massive impact apart from these words can they really do? Are they going to send the big guns in and call their bluff, or how are they going to do this?
On both sides? Is that what you're asking, or on?
Yeah.
On
so
one
you've
side?
got the Islamic Republic say we're going to shoot it. We're going to shoot, and you've got now the US saying no, we're going to have a Navy blockade, which some people thought that was going to happen with Venezuela.
Which is what Cuba is, right? Cuba is the damaged country from the naval blockade. Look, I think it's quite simple in that case. Iran will continue to do damage against the GCC because the GCC is not being offensive in any way whatsoever. And that is hard for the GCC to come to a conclusion that says that they must become offensive, which will be the next stage of this war. So Trump can go ahead and do what he needs to do. He can bring in the firepower and the systems to support the blockade, which is just going to draw in Iran. Because again, I don't see Iran not being able to stand behind that and say, okay, we don't have control of the Horn. They lose control of the Horn, then they lose everything. That's it. They're done. Because they won't restart. They won't continue to launch against Israel. And by the way, one of the things that happens during a ceasefire is you have to remember the amount of collection that's being done right now on Iran, whether it's Elent and SIGINT intelligence, makes this war and the U.S. more superior to what Iran does during a ceasefire. And so what tends to happen is during the ceasefire, the little animals come out of the woodwork to kind of look at the skies and say, okay, where do we stand right now? And how do we reconnect with our other units? All of that becomes visible now. And so that collection mechanism is incredibly powerful. It's probably been happening since 3 or 4 days now, since the ceasefire started, to better understand what is the current state of the Iranian capability. It's a good move on the Trump administration. That's all I can say. It's a great move. He's using power in a passive way, right? Tactical power, tactical might in a very passive way, and putting Iran into checkmate, or check, I guess you'd say. Right? Checkmate would be the winning little war.
He's just come out with this. President Trump, if I catch China giving Iran arms, it is going to get a 50% tariff.
He's 1 month away from that visit. Right? He's going to go.
But they have
to China.
Apparently, send a ship. They've sent like some stuff over. It says here as well. He says won't let Iran make money selling oil to those it likes. But then the Revolutionary Guards have just responded saying to Trump's naval blockade, any wrong move in the Strait of Hormuz will trap the enemy in deadly whirlpools.
Johnny, one of the things you have to remember, though, is that there are no ships and systems coming into Iran right now. So the only thing they can help them with is intelligence.
Which they have done a lot, right?
Yeah. Russia and China have helped with intelligence, but there is no cargo plane or any kind of ship, pulling up to the shores or ports of Iran right now, and that's, that's the hard part. I mean, maybe there's something going on with Pakistan moving items through there, but that would be visible. You could see all of that. So, I think what's happening is it's pushing it off more 2 to 4 weeks now versus 1 or 2 days, as he's saying. He's going to claim that. That's what he does, right? He likes to make up these numbers for the people that don't really watch or observe it. He likes to throw around these, it's over. This war is won and we're done. Give it another 4 weeks and we'll see what happens.
Here, China is giving Iran arms. I literally did the forensic analysis on the Shaheed for the Ukrainian MOD. The airframes uses Japanese carbon fibers and Swiss resin, but most of the electronics are Chinese.
Yeah, that was prior to the war starting, not now. That's not in today, right? There isn't a plane that's flying from China or anywhere else and flying into Iran. That's not happening. I mean, maybe during the ceasefire they agreed upon that, but
the United Kingdom, who ordinarily is shoulder to shoulder with the US on big world events, it's the first one really to the US's aid, like what happened with 9/11, like what happened in Iraq and all of that. This time around with Starmer has been very different in the way it's been operating. There's been a clear fallout as well between Trump and Starmer, and Starmer has to pander as well to a base there in Labour. Are we going to see like some kind of Downing Street press conference where he's going to have to change tack because he's going to impact the UK economy, so they have to get this Strait of Hormuz sorted out?
I mean, you're touching on something that's very sensitive right now. Is that relationship between the U.S. and the UK? And as you know, Starmer is getting tons of pressure to support the U.S. regardless of Trump's irrationality around certain things. And I think you know, did the UK say they're going to support this blockade? Maybe they didn't, but Trump can say that and make them look bad when they don't. Right? Again, it's about the information warfare, right? This is why you have to admit that he's a little bit good at making a lot of BS make sense, and he plays that card a lot.
People underestimate how smart he really is. They think he's just this buffoon and everything, but this is a lot of what he speaks is very intentional in what he does and how he goes about it, and they do underestimate him.
Yeah, agreed.
What do you think then? I mean, this is coming to a crux, isn't it?
I don't think so, Johnny. I think
no.
I think there is I think there are these windows. This window that we're going to see right now is the window of the blockade, which is a genius move. Somebody gave him some great military, direction, and he took it. I'll start a blockade, and then I will control who comes in and goes out, which puts Iran in a really bad position. In order to block, you don't have to become offensive, right? It's a defensive position, which then puts Iran in the offense. Will Iran fall from that bait? Will Iran take out an American or a third-party ship that's going through the Hormuz? And if they do, then that destroys a ceasefire, and it just causes everything to avalanche towards a tactical effort, with the area of operation only being the Horn of Hormuz. And again, while all this is happening, are the domestic resistance going to rise up? Are the Kurds going to play a role? Where does the MEK stand? Because they're the ones that's saying that they're the next, the next illegally elected leadership of Iran.
The MEK is irrelevant and has very little, no support at all. They're just
they don't. Right. And then we have to ask the same question. We have to ask the same question about Pahlavi. Remember, Johnny, this all started. I don't want to say this started, but I remember the first days where Pahlavi was telling everyone, rise up, go to the streets now. Remember that?
Well, it was the first time in 47 years that someone outside that regime gave an order and they came out in their millions on January the 8th and 9th to what Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi said. And he has said in the last week or so, he's watching developments very closely and will be looking at when to give the final order to come out, because it will inevitably, if this is the fall, and hopefully it is, it does require the ground, and eventually it does require Iranians to finish the job. Because I agree with you, I don't see any full-scale type invasion scenario. I do see potentially special ops, raids, stuff like that. I want to ask you a question, though. In terms, they've given the negotiators a pass, immunity of the ones that they've kind of looked at and think, right, maybe we can negotiate with this lot to get a deal. Now that the negotiations have all kind of broken down and they really went for it for 20 hours, to really weaken this regime, I would say, properly, is that some Iranians have said, well, you need to really take out, still there are major players in that regime that haven't been taken out. I think we may have lost Marvin. And some of those major players is Ghalibaf, which has been the key negotiator or the head of the negotiation delegation. The other has been, Abbas, the foreign secretary. Then you've got Peshkian, the puppet president. Then you've got Ejayi, the head of the judiciary. Then you've got Vahidi, who they say is the most powerful man inside the Islamic Republic. So people talk about this group, that group. People mention about, will the Kurds help? Iranian Kurds are Iranian. first and foremost. The separatists, Iranians, don't want anything to do with, and they can cause trouble, be troublemakers. Iran is a country made out of diversity. It has all types of people within Iran, from Azeris to Persians to Baluch to Kurds. They're all Iranian first. I just want to make that clear, crystal clear. The MEK is irrelevant. It has nothing. They're just a cuckoo cult. They've got money, but they're nothing. They're more unpopular than even the regime. Can you believe that? And that says something. 95% of Iranians want the end of the regime, and the vast majority want Pahlavi back. That's why we're so nostalgic. So I think Marvin's back. In terms of the current crop that they've given a pass of immunity to, because he said, Trump, you're only alive because we need someone to negotiate with. Now the negotiations end. Do they think, right, well, these lot are not going to, then they either aren't able to do a deal and get it passed over the line, or they're not willing to do the deal. So do we go to the next batch, and then the next batch, and then the next batch?
No. Johnny, I think never take into consideration what is said. Only look at what is done. And the thing that we know right now is there were three major points which we're never going, again, these 3 points Iran is never going to agree to. The Horn of Hormuz, nuclear weaponry, and ballistic missiles. There's absolutely zero chance that Iran is going to be like, okay, you know what, we'll give those up. And Trump knows that. The administration knows that. So there is something brewing in the background, whether it's a combination of the following: refuel, rearm, gathering more intelligence, or deploying assets in country in a covert manner, or creating the network in country to coordinate the Pahlavi green light and go for it. Because that's really what everybody knows is why this is all happening. Right? That is the end game. The end state of this is not nuclear technology. The end state is not, the Horn of Hormuz, because it was free before, right? The end state is the IRGC does not exist. Full stop. That's the end state. Lie, cheat, and steal to get to where you need to get in order to make that happen.
Just reading some of his comments because he's speaking a lot today, Trump. He says, we have regime change. No, you don't. That is one of the biggest gaslighting I've ever seen in my life, right? The same president, the same head of the judiciary, the same foreign minister, the same, if Khamenei 2.0 is alive, the son of Khamenei, if he's alive or incapacitated, the same support for the proxies, the same fact that they still have their nuclear stuff, their nuclear dust, the same support to those proxies, the same kind of a wish and want to keep the ballistic missiles, the same type of people that have had their hands all over terror and harm to Iranians. But he keeps going on at this point, and it does really annoy Iranians and most people that have any type of IQ, because it's completely utter BS on that point. But he says, we have regime change in Iran because the people we met, yes, they were very smart, very good. And he keeps trying to beef them up in terms of Ghalibaf, Arakshi, Abbas, the foreign minister, and others. But he doesn't seem to quite, or he does, but he's refusing to say it out loud. This regime is unreformable, right? The regime is basically death to America, death to Israel, the hijab. That is the Islamic Republic. It needs chaos. It needs mayhem. It's constant revolutionary state, right? The only way out of it is the end of the regime, for God's sake.
Let me say this. One of the realizations of the Department of War and the leadership of the U.S. military was, I think there was a surprise in how resilient and adaptive the IRGC has become at a tactical level. I think that was, again, when you think about the amount of war that has gone on, since the start, and they're still able to launch missiles and drones into the GCC and cluster munitions into Israel. I mean, that's fundamentally their SOP, right? That's all they can do, and they can still do it. So that, I think, was a surprise, and I think there is a lot of regrouping and rethinking the strategy of how to get to the heart of destroying the IRGC for good, because it's been 47 years. If they don't do it now, because this is the best chance they've had, then we've wasted lives, we've wasted money, we've wasted this window of opportunity. And I think that Trump knows that. And I think that that's one of the things I'll give him credit for, in regardless of the political or the domestic, the geopolitical internationally, or however you want to look at it. Remember, this is we're in his second year of these 4 years. He knew that he had to do it at the very beginning of his term. Good for him for being persistent and not steering the ship away and saying, "Oh, I'm done." I don't see him saying that, but again, he's keeping everything confused, which is very confusing to me, and it's very confusing to you and the people.
Yeah, because if he did, although military-wise, there's not much of a contest. They've been beaten badly on a military-to-military level, but that wasn't their whole tactic. That wasn't their strategy. Their version of success was to do exactly this, in terms of Strait of Hormuz, in terms of economic pressure, in terms of surviving, outlasting. And if they do that, they will claim that as a victory. Then their base and those radicals will also claim it as a victory. And Trump will know deep down that's not enough of a win. And the vacuum will be there for legacy media to say, "Oh, this is Trump, as Islamic Republic have won this," which is what the Sky News and BBC have keep habitually saying, and CNN and others. What objectives have really been achieved, because they still have the nuclear, they still have ballistic missiles, they're still supporting the proxies, it's still the same regime. And I think he's got great instincts. He knows that deep down, no matter how annoyed he does get with them, that this is at the moment not enough of a win, and would actually be constituted in some corners as a defeat should the regime still hold on to power and then rebuild. And then what? The GCC is going to go back to normal. Investors are going to go into the GCC with them on their doorstep after they've been hitting the GCC, and Israel, existential threat and everything else. And then someone says here in the chat, war is a contest of wills, and the regime's ability to wage war is a product of their means and will. So Trump has been advised to take away their means. There is no way out for the mad mullahs. Someone else says, Trump has said repeatedly that the families of the fallen soldiers has asked him to finish the job.
GCC is asking him to finish the job, to be honest. I think it's that far advanced. And again,
especially Saudi, apparently, and UAE.
Definitely UAE, and this ceasefire period of time, re-strategizing a lot of politics to get support from the EU and the GCC. All of that is happening. So don't think that that's not happening, and don't think that the tactical plans aren't being reevaluated now that we can see, where is Iran showing face from an intelligence standpoint. And again, so in the end, Israel and the US and the GCC and the EU will have a bigger hand in understanding the intelligence. The question is, what plan is palatable to the people in the countries they represent? But there are multiple options, right? There's always going to be multiple courses of action. So the COAs that are constantly being iteratively refined and refined and refined.
Yeah. Is there anything else they can do? Because from an outsider perspective, it feels a bit frustrating that they're somehow being hampered with this Strait of Hormuz. That is there no big juggernaut they can do in terms of next move that's pretty big? Is it because they do fear like losing ships, losing people, so therefore they're not prepared quite yet to go there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other option is political, right? Putting pressure on China, putting more pressure on Russia. So I think we've talked about this in the past, where everybody talks about World War III and thinks that World War III may happen. And my argument is that no, this is World War III. This is what modern warfare looks like. It is asymmetrical. It is not just a tactical kinetic war. And with so many different fronts, there's a lot of strategies that are happening behind the scenes that we don't get to know about or see. So the heat is on, the window is limited. The U.S. is definitely doing their strategies. And in my personal opinion, all they need to do is to take one section, one small area, one small base of the south of Iran, which will create a domino effect, right? Can the U.S. put troops on the ground around the Horn to protect the Horn? And there will be a cost to that, but that will be a determining factor that will show a lot of what Iran is willing to do when it comes to having foreign, soldiers on their land.
Yeah, he also says this, Marvin, as I'm multitasking away. Trump on gas prices could be lower before the midterms, could be higher. Those midterms are around November, I think. He says that, but he's very sensitive to the markets, and that won't fly. It's not going to fly. I don't buy that.
No, he's just going to say those things again.
Yeah.
The markets want action. The markets want safety. And listen, Johnny, to be honest with you, thank God for the markets, right? Because they seem to be the most sensible in all of this. and that sensibility, the reflection of what the market thinks of risk, is a good thermometer to really put everything in check, right? You can't argue. Trump can't shut the market up as he can with the intelligence units or the agency or his own State Department. He can shut those people up, but he can't shut up the market. And I think it's great that the market is speaking so loudly in order to gauge and guide the tactical decisions.
Someone says, so what happens when a Chinese ship is trying to go out of the Strait of Hormuz? Is he going to block it? And what would China do? Because they really rely on that.
It's a great question, right? I think what will happen is the U.S. to say, "Hey, China, we'll sell you that. We'll sell you that oil. We'll sell to you," because that's what he's been saying, right? Buy it from us.
Yeah. Some people say that he lined up Vance deliberately because Vance was seen more on the Tucker Carlson side of things and anti-war, and allowed him to lead the negotiations.
Look, I've heard that too. The reality is that Vance is the vice president. Okay, so let's not even try to create him being something else. He is the vice president, and he brings the most authority to a conversation politically, right? So whether or not, some people were saying, well, they want to have Vance in because he may run, and if he gets elected, then he'll hold the guarantee more. All that stuff is noise. Let's just stick to the facts. He is the second in command, and he should be at the negotiation. I think that's a good use of Vance.
Yeah, I've heard that said a few times when it comes to Vance and Trump.
I'm gonna gracefully bow out.
No worries. Lovely hearing your voice, Marvin, and your analysis and your input. Always good to have you on the show. This is Marvin, by the way, folks. He's appeared on the show a few times. So see you again when you come back.
Yeah, I'm gonna. I'm going to be heading back to the area tomorrow. So I'll have more to say. I'm going to lose you, I think.
Yeah,
I'm
I
losing
think
you.
you're breaking up there.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, let's stay
See you, Marvin.
in touch. Okay.
Take it. That was Marvin. Interesting, folks, eh? Interesting. Trump says US is bigger than Saudi Arabia and Russia and any other country combined when it comes to oil. The Emirates and Saudis can bypass the Strait of Hormuz to sell their oil. The Iranians can't. It's crunch time, I think. The oil prices are very important, folks. Trump says, you know, he doesn't pay much to it, but he does, and the world does. It's really important. This game of chicken can't last. There has to be someone who overwhelmingly wins, and the Iranians want it to be Iran, it to be the US, and the help of Israel for this liberation of Iranians. Someone says that even if Iran is turned to Afghanistan or worse through sanctions, etc., which you won't because Iran's a proper country. No offense to Afghanistan, but that's the reality. Iran's not Iraq. Iran's not Afghanistan. It's not egotism speaking. That's just history and culture and reality. The regime will not only survive but flourish. They are fed on pain and misery. Well, they are fed on pain and misery. The regime ideal world is something that resembles the event of Karbala 1400 years ago. The only solution is enabling people to change the regime. People changing the regime agree. We have this guy who's, I don't know what kind of comments he's making. I'm not even going to mention it. You get all kinds of comments of this, don't you, on live streams, I must say. He says here, the Israelis are great partners. This is President Trump. Like Bibi says, we are the big brother. They are the small brother. Interesting. Interesting. All right. I think that's it. That's a wrap. We've gone through everything with this live stream. If you have enjoyed it and you're listening on X, do subscribe to Eternal Iran on YouTube. And if you're on YouTube, we're growing. We're trying to build on YouTube. We've had 920 people go through this live. 920 people. So I want to thank each and every one of you. Until next time.